Chapter 238. The closer they got to the fire lake, the hotter the temperature became. Afraid that the big-headed zombie wouldn't be able to withstand the heat, Han Shuo had no choice but to use his magical yuan to activate the mystical glacial spellfire to lower the temperature around them. Zombie warriors that were used to darkness had an instinctive aversion to sunlight and blazing heat. This big-headed zombie was no exception. Its body couldn't help but sway in Han Shuo's hands, as if it was afraid of the burning fire lake. However, with Han Shuo's steel-like grip, it couldn't move at all. Two large clouds of white smoke rapidly approached from the surrounding rock walls, arriving next to Fire Grand Magus Marceau in the blink of an eye. At this time, Marceau and Han Shuo were only 3 meters away from the fire lotus below. As they were worried that the temperature of the fire lake would be too high for the barrier to withstand, the two didn't dare to approach the fire lotus too quickly. They were afraid that the barrier would shatter from the scorching heat. Why are you here? Marceau was shocked when Han Shuo approached in the form of 2 clouds of smoke. Although she couldn't see Han Shuo's appearance due to the thick smoke, she recognized Han Shuo from Han Shuo's actions just now. I can't withstand the heat anymore. Please let me enter the barrier to rest. Han Shuo's hurried pleading came from the thick smoke. Han Shuo had already stopped next to the barrier when his voice was heard. Marceau seemed to be in a bit of a dilemma when she heard this. It seemed that it was very difficult for her to bring Han Shuo into the barrier at the moment. She stood there in a daze, hesitating for a moment. Suddenly, Han Shuo's exhausted cry of surprise sounded from the thick cloud of smoke next to Marceau. The thick smoke suddenly sank down and fell into the beautiful fire lotuses that were blooming below. Shrill screams suddenly came from the thick smoke below, causing one's heart to tremble. This caused the 2 girls, who were confused by the sudden change, to be unable to react for a moment. However, Han Shuo, who was covered by the thick smoke, had a calm expression on his face even though he was screaming in agony. He grabbed the struggling big-headed zombie warrior and slowly pushed him into the pistil of the fire lotus. An arrow of blood shot out from Han Shuo's left index finger and fell directly into the big-headed zombie's mouth. At the same time, Han Shuo imprinted a seal of darkness magic on the big-headed zombie's body. A mass of pulsating purple flame covered the surface of Han Shuo's body according to his will. Then, Han Shuo shot out beams of black demonic light that twined around the big-headed zombie. When Han Shuo formed the shape of a lotus with a few drops of blood essence and forcefully clasped it onto the big-headed zombie's head, he seemed to have triggered some sort of restriction. In the blink of an eye, 24 blazing, blood-red beams of light suddenly shot out from the cave walls surrounding the fire lake, all converging towards the fire lotus. The dense fire origin energy seemed to be escorted by 24 ribbons as it frantically gathered towards the fire lotus in the center. The beautiful fire lotus blossomed with dazzling red light like a dancing flame. It slowly began to shrink its petals at a miraculous speed and trajectory, wrapping around the big-headed zombie that Han Shuo had ordered to stay in the pistil bit by bit. What's going on? What's going on? Marceau, who was 3 meters above Han Shuo, couldn't help but cry out when she saw the mysterious changes in her surroundings and felt the frantic gathering of the fire origin energy. However, Han Shuo's shrill screams completely drowned out Marceau's cries. This made Marceau, who was unaware of the situation, unable to guess what had happened to Han Shuo below. She didn't dare to descend another 3 meters to see what was happening below. The dense fire origin energy around the fire lake, under the influence of the formation, was all channeled towards the center of the fire lotus, providing sufficient nourishment for the fire elite zombie's formation. On the day that the fire elite zombie was formed, the fire lotus that it nurtured would very likely become a treasure that the fire elite zombie could control and help him obtain all sorts of strange abilities. 24 beams of blood-red light gathered towards the fire lotus in the center from the cave walls. The fire origin energy that had lingered in the entire place of extreme fire for tens of thousands of years was slowly nourishing the big-headed zombie's body through the fire lotus. With the protection of the fire lotus pistil, the big-headed zombie didn't need to endure the scorching heat. It only needed to continuously absorb all sorts of pure energy and cultivate according to the imprint that Han Shuo had left in its mind. It would be able to continuously change its body and become a powerful fire elite zombie. Roar. A terrifying roar sounded from above the fire lake. The Lord of the Flames seemed to have sensed the changes in the Kingdom of Fire and couldn't help but roar. Through the Een Demon's observation, Han Shuo discovered that the Lord of the Flames, who had a slight upper hand despite fighting 1 against 3, had already given up on the battle against the Golden Dragon, Cyclops, and Silver Ape. It roared as it moved its enormous volcanic body, slowly walking towards the largest crevice in the valley. The fire lotus that was nurtured in the fire lake was a fire attribute treasure. It contained some strange power. As the master of the Kingdom of Fire, the Lord of the Flames must have some sort of connection with the fire lotus. Perhaps the Lord of the Flames had already left an imprint on the fire lotus and treated it as a taboo item. Han Shuo had used the demonic magic formation and used this taboo item without permission. He had even imprinted a living being within it to absorb the enormous amount of fire origin energy in the surroundings. This must have alarmed the Lord of the Flames and made it come over to understand everything that had happened. At this moment, the fire lotus petals had already shrunk into a bud, slowly sinking into the fire lake. When Han Shuo saw this, he immediately understood that he had succeeded. He began to scream in pain as he slowly moved upwards. Up until now, all of Han Shuo's arrangements had gone smoothly. However, he still had no way of predicting the final outcome. According to Chu Kanglin's memories, Han Shuo knew that after the fire lotus petals had shrunk, it would be very difficult to open it again without special methods and opportunities. However, as the master of this fire lake, Han Shuo had no way of knowing if the Lord of the Flames had a way to open the fire lotus. From the very beginning, Han Shuo knew that he wasn't completely confident in this matter. The reason why he had to do this was because he had no other choice. Otherwise, if he lost this opportunity, he didn't know when the Lord of the Flames would leave this place of extreme fire, nor would he have a fire grand magus bring him into this strange space. Therefore, even if he wasn't completely confident, Han Shuo had to make use of this rare opportunity to plant the big-headed zombie into the fire lotus. As for the final outcome, whether the Lord of the Flames would be able to open the fire lotus, or whether it would kill the big-headed zombie, this wasn't something that Han Shuo could grasp. It could only be said that it all depended on the will of the heavens. As Han Shuo's figure slowly rose into the air, he purposefully withdrew the purple flames protecting his legs and used the high temperature of the fire lake to roast his legs. In an instant, Han Shuo's trousers were charred black. His legs were exposed to the blazing heat, and in the blink of an eye, a large area was burnt by the flames. "Save me!" A mournful scream rang out from Han Shuo's mouth, his voice urgent and desperate. However, under the cover of the thick smoke, Han Shuo didn't have any expression of pain on his face. Instead, he was terrifyingly calm. The burning pain from the large area of his legs seemed to be happening to someone else's body. He was currently looking at the 2 people in the boundary above him with a bright expression. Fire Grand Magus Marceau watched as the fire lotus slowly sank into the lake of fire. She seemed to be extremely discouraged and had a face full of regret. She didn't seem to care about Han Shuo's shouts as she kept murmuring, "My fire lotus, my fire lotus?" On the other hand, it was the female knight Sophie who showed sympathy for Han Shuo. She was drenched in sweat as she panted. She pulled on the corner of Marceau's clothes and said anxiously, "Let's save him first." Under Sophie's tugging, Fire Grand Magus Marceau suddenly woke up with a start. She looked down with a mournful expression and sighed. She nodded unwillingly and started chanting a magic incantation. A strong magical wave suddenly enveloped Han Shuo's body. Amidst the crackling sparks, Han Shuo's body was pulled by the fire element and suddenly squeezed into the boundary that Sophie and Marceau were in. When Han Shuo had left earlier, a part of the 3 to 4 meter magic boundary had been cut off. Now that Han Shuo's body had squeezed in again, the part that had been cut off didn't return. The magic boundary that Sophie and Marceau had been in suddenly became very crowded with Han Shuo's addition. Right now, Han Shuo's face was pale and weak. A large area from his knees to his feet had been roasted by the high temperature of the fire lake. Not only did it look very horrifying, but it also gave off an unpleasant smell. In the crowded boundary, the Fire Grand Magus didn't seem to be too willing to lean against Han Shuo due to her identity, age, or other reasons. She forcefully retreated to a corner, causing the limp Han Shuo and Sophie to lean against each other. Han Shuo moved his body with difficulty and pretended to cry out in pain, seeming to want to sit up from his limp position. When his two hands were supporting the invisible boundary, he couldn't avoid touching Sophie's thighs because of the squeezing of the boundary. The temperature within the boundary had been maintained at around 40 degrees after Han Shuo had left. Sophie was still sweating profusely, and her entire body was wet and uncomfortable. Her clothes were all wet and stuck to her curvaceous body. Under Han Shuo's unintentional touch, he could feel the taut fullness of Sophie's thighs. He could even feel the powerful strength contained within her extremely elastic thighs. Originally, the burning of his two legs was intentional. This degree of burning wouldn't affect the function of Han Shuo's two legs. Apart from looking a bit frightening and causing some completely bearable pain to Han Shuo, it didn't have any other effects. Therefore, when Han Shuo pretended to be in pain and wanted to sit up, he let out low cries of pain. He wasn't as miserable as he appeared to be. Therefore, when his arm unavoidably touched Sophie's slender thighs, he actually had the leisure to evaluate the elasticity and beauty of Sophie's thighs in his heart. Perhaps it was because the boundary was indeed very crowded, but this kind of action, which could even be considered frivolous, was only treated by Sophie as a helpless and unintentional carelessness. It didn't cause her displeasure. Her crescent brows slightly furrowed. Instead, she looked at Han Shuo with some sympathy and said with a kind heart, "I'll help you." Sophie's soft voice rang in Han Shuo's ears. Then, under the pained expression of Han Shuo clenching his teeth, her body slightly crouched down. Her slender hands supported Han Shuo's shoulders, helping Han Shuo get up and help him sit down in the boundary. During this process, due to the crowding of the boundary, it was inevitable that the two of them would come into physical contact. When Han Shuo's arms were propped up by her, the skin between their arms was tightly pressed against each other. Han Shuo even accidentally used his shoulder to touch Sophie's firm and curvy breasts. "Thank you very much." When Sophie helped Han Shuo sit up from his limp posture, Han Shuo sincerely looked at Sophie and sincerely thanked her. "Don't mention it. This is what I should do." Sophie's delicate face had been red because of the high temperature, but the sharp-eyed Han Shuo still found that Sophie's face at this moment was even more rosy than before. Her expression also seemed a little shy. It seemed that the close contact between the two of them had indeed made this kind girl feel a little uncomfortable and embarrassed. Until now, Han Shuo and Sophie were still very close. Although Sophie deliberately kept a distance, because of the crowding of the boundary, the furthest distance between the two of their bodies would not exceed 20 centimeters. They could clearly smell each other's scent. The strong scent of a man on Han Shuo's body and the fragrant scent of sweat on Sophie's body blended together and were breathed in by the two young men and women. This kind of peculiar scent was like a miraculous medicine, nourishing Han Shuo's restless heart and giving Han Shuo an inexplicable throbbing feeling. Han Shuo gazed deeply at Sophie. Perhaps it was because of the high temperature, but his gaze was burning fiercely. When Sophie turned her head away uncomfortably, Han Shuo greedily took a deep breath and his expression returned to normal. He smiled brightly at Phoebe, then slowly closed his eyes and began to adjust his breathing, not letting go of any time to recover his magical yuan. Through the Yin demon's spying, Han Shuo discovered that Phoebe's face was flushed red and her expression was a little unnatural. Her long eyelashes continuously fluttered, and while Han Shuo was adjusting his breathing, her bright eyes strangely focused on his body. Who knew what she was thinking? On the other side, Fire Grand Magus Marceau didn't notice Han Shuo and Sophie's movements. As the Lord of the Flames' loud roar approached, Marceau had no time to care about her surroundings. She was focused on controlling the boundary and slowly rising above the magma. Chapter 239. The Lord of the Flames' terrifying voice brought with it a violent power that could destroy the heavens and earth. It stopped all of the surging magma, and then flew down towards the fire lake at an even more ferocious speed. In that instant, the magic barrier that had been flying up with the magma was affected by the surging magma. Not only was it unable to rise higher, but it also rapidly fell towards the fire lake below. Not good. Fire Grand Magus Marceau exclaimed with a face full of fear. She said anxiously, "The Lord of the Flames is controlling the lava's descent. I've used up too much mental strength right now, so I can't control the barrier to fly out." Han Shuo, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Marceau. "So you're saying that we're trapped in the fire lake?" The kind-hearted female knight Sophie was also at her wits' end in this situation. She looked worriedly at the scorching magma that was sweeping towards them, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Fire Grand Magus Marceau revealed a helpless expression and said to Han Shuo and Sophie, "I'm very sorry. I don't think I'll be able to leave the fire lake with you two. I'm sorry." A strong magical fluctuation suddenly came from where Han Shuo and Sophie were. Just like the last time when Han Shuo had left the barrier, the area where Han Shuo and Sophie were was cut apart by a sharp weapon amidst the sparks. It was directly removed from Marceau's barrier. Without the support of Marceau's magical elements, Han Shuo and Sophie were immediately drowned in the surging magma and fell towards the fire lake. Rather than the three of us dying together, it's better for me to escape alone. This is something that can't be helped, so please don't blame me." Marceau murmured coldly to herself as she watched the two quickly drown in the magma and fall towards the bottom. Roar! The earth-shattering howl grew closer and closer. Marceau was shocked and didn't dare to stay any longer. She activated the barrier that tightly wrapped around her body and slowly moved upwards against the magma that was pouring down like a waterfall. "Ah!" The Lord of the Flames' loud roar drowned out Sophie's screams as she fell towards the fire lake. Other than Han Shuo, who was leaning close to her, no one else heard her screams of despair. Even female knights with great strength would instinctively show their cowardice when facing the threat of death and knowing that they were doomed to die. Such a desperate cry was not shameful. However, if this kind of exclamations were to ring incessantly in one's ears, no one would be able to bear it, and Han Shuo was no exception. "Miss Sophie, can you stop screaming?" Han Shuo said to the screaming Sophie with a pained expression as he held onto Sophie's waist with one arm. Strangely, the magical barrier that Marceau had left behind didn't suddenly shatter due to Marceau's departure. Instead, it was covered by a layer of dark light. The dense magma in the surroundings crashed into the dark barrier, but it didn't move at all. Only rays of dark light slowly seeped out of Han Shuo's body and tightly attached to the dark barrier. Sophie quickly recognized the situation after being berated by Han Shuo. Her bright eyes quickly scanned the surroundings and she suddenly cried out in joy, "We're actually not dead. Of course, I've just recovered a bit of my strength. I think we can still hold on until we leave this mysterious existence." Han Shuo smiled at Sophie and comforted her. Suddenly, Sophie realized that her waist was still being held by Han Shuo's arm. She immediately straightened her body uncomfortably and broke free from Han Shuo's arm, maintaining a tight distance from Han Shuo. Seeing that Sophie had already woken up from her panic, Han Shuo didn't purposely take advantage of her. He smiled apologetically at Sophie and said, "I had no choice just now, I hope you don't mind. The Lord of the Flames will return soon, we need to leave immediately." That Marceau is a famous figure in the Brute Merchant Alliance. To think that she would do such a thing. What a despicable person. The kind Sophie was still brooding over Marceau's actions and angrily rebuked him. Han Shuo felt that it was only natural and didn't think that Marceau's actions were inappropriate. After all, the three of them had only met by chance and didn't have any true friendship. In times of danger, of course one had to think for oneself. Marceau's actions were also because she had no choice. Han Shuo didn't hold any grudges against her. This was because if he was in Marceau's shoes, Han Shuo would definitely have done the same. However, Han Shuo didn't say much and only shrugged with a smile. He then focused on circulating his magical yuan and slowly flew towards the lava. At Han Shuo's current level of magical yuan, he was able to naturally form a protective shield around his body with his adept control of magical yuan. As long as his magical yuan didn't run out, Han Shuo would be able to keep the shield unbroken and resist the invasion of the lava and flames. Compared to Marceau's previous boundary, Han Shuo's protective barrier had a moderate temperature. The various threats in the surroundings couldn't penetrate the barrier and land on Han Shuo and Sophie. The two of them flew at an extremely fast speed and passed through the layers of lava. They quickly identified a relatively narrow crack and charged upwards against the blazing sparks. During this process, Sophie had been paying attention to Han Shuo's protective barrier. She had a puzzled expression on her face, and even more carefully extended her hand to touch the protective barrier that was circulating with black light. She felt a strange sensation and was lost in thought. As he flew upwards, Han Shuo's expression was relaxed and confident. There was no trace of the pain and difficulty he had shown earlier. This caused Sophie, who had been observing him, to be astounded. In the end, she couldn't help but ask suspiciously, "Have you been injured before?" Han Shuo suddenly understood when she said this. He turned his head to glance at Sophie and revealed a bitter smile. "Don't think that I'm fine just because I look relaxed. I've actually been enduring heart-wrenching pain all this time. It's just that I have to show my strong side in front of a beauty. Only then will I leave you with the impression of a strong man." Sophie obviously hadn't expected that Han Shuo would actually say this. There was a hint of ambiguity in his words, and Sophie could naturally hear it. She was stunned at first and then rolled her eyes at Han Shuo. She said with some amusement, "You're really an interesting person. Who talks like that?" Shrugging his shoulders, Han Shuo pretended to be in pain. He even circulated his demonic arts and broke out in hot sweat, causing his face to turn pale. He panted heavily and said with difficulty, "You see, this is actually my real situation. I might not be able to hold on at any time, and then we'll fall into the fire lake together to see the beautiful lotus." Han Shuo's sudden change in demeanor made Sophie extremely uncomfortable. She cried out as if she had been frightened, "Don't scare me. Regardless of whether you're real or fake, I still want to see your unruffled appearance just now." "No problem." Han Shuo laughed heartily. The painful expression on his face disappeared in the blink of an eye, and the traces of sweat on his forehead also magically disappeared. He winked at Sophie with a mischievous smile and teased in a relaxed manner, "Isn't this better?" Sophie couldn't help but laugh softly. She waved her fist and punched Han Shuo's chest, panting with rage as she waved her fist in front of Han Shuo. She said amusedly, "You evil fellow, so you've been playing with me all along." Ha! Han Shuo laughed proudly, bringing Sophie along as they broke through the layers of magma obstructing them, charging straight towards a crack that had appeared above. "You guys are actually fine." Suddenly, Fire Grand Magus Marceau of the Brute Merchant Alliance cried out in alarm from the boundary that was enveloped by a large ball of magma below Han Shuo and Sophie. Marceau seemed to have been drenched in rain. Her entire body was drenched in sweat, and her face was pale as she panted weakly. She moved the magic boundary with difficulty and slowly moved it upwards. Her current appearance seemed to be something that Han Shuo had purposefully put on earlier. It was obvious that she had expended a great deal of mental strength, and it was becoming more and more difficult for her to hold on. This was especially so when she discovered that Han Shuo and Sophie had passed over her body like arrows and were flying towards the ground. She was even more shocked. "Hey, let's meet up above." Han Shuo looked down at Marceau beneath his feet and said this with a smile. He then circulated his magical yuan and rushed towards the crack in the ground, ignoring Marceau's astonished gaze. One of the Yin demons remained at the lake of fire below, while the other two remained in the valley. Han Shuo had observed the entire situation clearly through the three Yin demons. When the Lord of the Flames abandoned its three opponents and returned to the Kingdom of Fire, out of the three powerful creatures that were fighting it, only the silver giant ape went forward to stop it. However, it was easily beaten back by the Lord of the Flames. Without the Golden Dragon and Cyclops' cooperation, the giant silver ape had no way of dealing with the Lord of the Flames. It could only watch as the Lord of the Flames entered the largest crack in the ground and sank into the depths of the ground along with the thick, turbulent magma. After the Lord of the Flames disappeared, the proud golden dragon seemed to finally remember the purpose of coming to the valley and immediately began to attack its ally, the Cyclops. The Cyclops seemed to have known this would happen, and began to fight with the golden dragon. They forcefully blasted open the valley's passageway and gradually fought their way out. When the Lord of the Flames fell into the kingdom of fire, the giant silver ape knew that it didn't have any more chances. It pounded its chest and stomped its feet as it left the passageway the golden dragon had torn open, disappearing without a trace after a few leaps. This information had been obtained by Han Shuo through the 2 Yin demons he had left in the valley. The only Yin demon left near the Lake of Fire had also finally discovered the Lord of the Flames' enormous body. It had mixed with the turbulent magma and was slowly sinking to the bottom of the Lake of Fire. Roar! A long howl sounded from a crack in the ground as a sharp black arrow shot out and instantly hovered in the air above the valley. Having escaped death, Han Shuo was in such a good mood that he let out another long howl. The black light swirling around his body cracked and shattered like an eggshell. Streaks of black light intertwined together like lightning and slowly sank into Han Shuo's skin. These wriggling black lights writhed on Han Shuo's exposed skin like nimble tattoos, displaying a soul-stirring, bewitching beauty. As Han Shuo let out a drawn-out dragon's roar, the black lights slowly receded and Han Shuo's skin returned to its normal color. How much longer are you going to hold on for? Sophie watched the series of changes on Han Shuo's body and couldn't help but glare at Han Shuo to remind him when she saw Han Shuo clinging to her waist. Because the protective barrier had shattered, Han Shuo was afraid that Sophie would fall directly from the sky. Therefore, in his panic just now, he'd once again used his right hand to wrap around Sophie's slender waist, feeling the elasticity and softness of Sophie's slender waist. The long howl from before had been indescribably pleased and satisfied. But I had no choice, I had no choice. Han Shuo didn't feel the slightest bit awkward as he chuckled. I don't know if you'll fall to your death if I let go. Looking unkindly at Han Shuo, Sophie glared at Han Shuo and pointed below. The ground is only a few meters above me, and there's an empty space around that hasn't been covered by lava. Do you think a knight who dares come to the dark forest alone will fall to his death from a few meters in the air? I don't think so. You should have warned me earlier. Han Shuo rubbed his head and grinned cheekily. He tightened his right hand around Sophie's slender waist, feeling the softness and wonder of her slender waist for a moment before letting go and letting her fall to the ground. Suddenly, the Lord of the Flames' strange howls sounded from the depths of the ground. Through the observation of the Yin demon below, Han Shuo discovered that the Lord of the Flames' enormous body had completely melded into the Lake of Fire. The fire lotus that had sunk into the Lake of Fire was held in its iron-like palm. Waves of enormous intent descended from the Lord of the Flames into the fire lotus through some mysterious power. Just as Han Shuo was on tenterhooks, the Lord of the Flames suddenly raised its head and howled repeatedly. It held the closed fire lotus as if it had found a treasure and carefully caressed it. The killing intent on its body vanished, and it hugged the fire lotus to its chest like a mother. The entire Lake of Fire was instantly filled with a strange motherly love. It can't be treating the fire elite zombie as its own child, can it? Han Shuo was flabbergasted as he guessed incredulously. Chapter 240. A ray of red light flew out, and the panting fire Grand Magus Marceau finally managed to escape with great difficulty. Her wrinkled face was filled with dejection as she looked around with flickering eyes, wanting to get a clear picture of Tanai's current situation. After being tormented by the 4 behemoths, the beautiful scenery and flower-filled valley was completely destroyed. The ground was filled with ravines and streams of magma flowed everywhere. Inside the holes that were full of potholes, raging flames were burning, and the air was filled with the smell of burnt flesh. Marceau looked around and heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that the golden dragon, Cyclops, and silver ape weren't there. When she discovered that Han Shuo and Sophie were coldly looking at her from afar, she forced out an ugly smile and explained apologetically, "Congratulations on regaining a new life. The situation just now was special. I hope you can understand. I had no choice." Sophie's pretty face was full of disdain and disdain. She snorted and didn't look at Marceau again. She said to Han Shuo, who was hovering in the air, "Let's go. There's nothing to say to this kind of person." "Yes, I think so too." Han Shuo agreed with Sophie's suggestion and looked coldly at Marceau from afar. A fiendish aura naturally overflowed, but he didn't make a move. Instead, he took the lead and flew out of the valley. Sophie chanted a strange summoning incantation, and the white and beautiful Pegasus once again appeared in the scorching hot valley, naturally carrying Sophie on its back. The fiery clouds in the sky above the valley gradually dissipated after losing the control of the Lord of the Flames' terrifying power. The mountain wind blew down from above, and the raging flames were slowly extinguished. The formation of the Fire Elite Zombie definitely didn't take a day or two. It would be a slow process. From the Een Demon's observation, not only did the Lord of the Flames not have the slightest bit of malice towards the life within the Fire Lotus, it even carefully protected him like a child. The Fire Elite Zombie's safety was definitely not an issue. Once the Fire Elite Zombie had absorbed enough energy, it would certainly emerge from the Fire Lotus. At that time, this place of extreme fire would also become the Fire Elite Zombie's Kingdom of Fire. Using his connection with the Fire Elite Zombie, Han Shuo could use the Fire Elite Zombie to sweep away all the fire attribute spiritual stones that had been bred in the surrounding place of extreme fire. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry to collect them. As Han Shuo flew out of the valley, Sophie rode on her beautiful Pegasus and followed behind Han Shuo unhurriedly, disappearing into the valley with Han Shuo. Fire Grand Magus Marceau watched as Han Shuo and Sophie left. Her expression was uncertain, but she didn't make any moves. She only looked at the sky where the burning clouds had receded after Han Shuo and Sophie had disappeared for a while. She then used the levitation spell to quickly rise into the sky. As soon as they left the valley, Han Shuo immediately communicated with Dark Dragon Gilbert through his mind. Little Skull had already been sent back to the other dimension. A Een demon that had stayed in the fire lake also flew out of the crack in the ground and converged on Han Shuo's side. When the Een demon returned to Han Shuo's side, Han Shuo also sensed Dark Dragon Gilbert's position. Behind him, female knight Sophie rode on a Pegasus and followed Han Shuo unhurriedly. A pair of beautiful eyes focused on Han Shuo's body and shone with a faint luster. No one knew what she was thinking. Han Shuo had a very good impression of this female knight named Sophie. When Han Shuo had flown up from the Fire Lotus and pretended to be injured, it was Sophie who had persuaded the hesitant Marceau to let him enter the boundary. When Han Shuo walked into the boundary, Sophie didn't mind the horrible and unpleasant smell on Han Shuo's feet and helped Han Shuo to sit up. Sophie's kind behavior won Han Shuo's favor. So much so that when Marceau let go, Han Shuo immediately enveloped Sophie in his protective barrier and expended even more magical yuan to protect Sophie. "I think we should split up." Sophie, who had been following Han Shuo silently, finally spoke faintly after they were a distance away from the valley. Turning around, Han Shuo looked deeply at Sophie and revealed a radiant smile, saying, "You are a kind and righteous knight. It's a pleasure to meet you." Their separation was imminent. Sophie also stared deeply at Han Shuo with interest, as though she wanted to memorize Han Shuo's appearance in her heart. After a while, she smiled sweetly and said, "Brian, if you have time to visit Kasi Empire, I can be your guide." Han Shuo was delighted. He then asked with interest, "Then how should I find you?" Sophie glared at Han Shuo reproachfully and said strangely, "Could it be that you've really just made your debut? You don't even know who I am?" Shaking his head, Han Shuo said amusedly, "Are you very famous?" Kasi Empire's sacred knight Solo is my father. I'm the only Earth Knight in Kasi Empire who rides a Pegasus. As long as you come to Kasi Empire and want to find me, you will definitely be able to find me. Goodbye, interesting scoundrel. Sophie left behind a string of bell-like giggles and left in another direction on her Pegasus. She flew into the horizon like a little fairy and disappeared in the blink of an eye. She was actually the daughter of a sacred knight. Han Shuo was greatly shocked. Only now did he truly care about Sophie's identity. He didn't expect her to be born into a wealthy family and have such a terrifyingly powerful father. In the current profound continent, only the strongest experts would add the word sacred to their professions. Regardless of whether it was a sacred magus, sacred swordmaster, or sacred knight, they were all publicly recognized as the most powerful figures on the continent. No matter which country they were in, these people would have an illustrious position and be revered by all citizens. Such a figure possessed terrifying strength. Such a figure could even reverse the outcome of a war. They existed as the protector of a country and possessed strength that even the king had no choice but to treat with caution. Sophie's father was actually a sacred knight. No wonder she was so confident. When Han Shuo expressed that he had never heard of her, she rolled her eyes fiercely at Han Shuo. However, in the legends, there was another kind of existence that surpassed the boundary of sacred and possessed the title of god. They were an existence closest to the gods and were known as demigods in the secular world. They were the pinnacle of their professions. In hundreds and thousands of years, only a few characters had appeared. They were known as magic gods, sword gods, and divine knights. Such demigod existences possessed the destructive power to destroy the heavens and earth. They had strength comparable to the gods. If they could break through their limits and take another step forward, they would be able to break through the shackles and become true gods. It was a pity that the current profound continent didn't have such legendary figures with the word God. Those with the word sacred were already the pinnacle existences on the continent. Sophie flew away on her Pegasus. Han Shuo only gasped in surprise at Sophie's identity for a moment before flying in the direction of Gilbert's location. Along the way, there were huge footprints and traces of an intense battle everywhere. The 2-meter-wide footprints were obviously from the Cyclops. The towering ancient trees in the surroundings were broken and toppled in rows, and some of the small hills were left with bombardment marks. With just a few glances, Han Shuo was certain that the Cyclops and the Golden Dragon must have left the valley from here while fighting. Gilbert must have secretly tailed the two enormous beings. Even now, Gilbert was still following the two powerful beings. Han Shuo could sense his constantly shifting position. Without taking a closer look at his surroundings, Han Shuo followed his connection with Gilbert and activated the art of the demonic ninth heavens with all his might, chasing after Gilbert like a rainbow. Previously, Tanai had been a sea of fire. Only after leaving the valley did he realize that it was already late at night. The stars shone brilliantly and the moonlight sprinkled down like flowing water. It was a pity that the scenery along the way wasn't as beautiful as it seemed due to the battle between the two powerful beings. As Han Shuo flew at full speed for a great distance, he could already hear a tremendous rumble in the distance. It was as if mountains were collapsing and the earth was splitting. The earth seemed to be trembling from the tremendous sound as the distance between him and Gilbert gradually decreased. Just as Han Shuo was flying at high speed, thinking that he would be able to see Gilbert soon, the tremendous rumble in the distance suddenly disappeared. Even the connection between Han Shuo and Gilbert was severed at the same time. Han Shuo couldn't sense his existence no matter how hard he tried. Greatly alarmed, Han Shuo didn't understand what had suddenly happened. He was bewildered by this sudden turn of events. He once again increased his speed and flew towards the location of the black dragon he'd just sensed. The speed of a shooting star allowed Han Shuo to arrive at the scene in a matter of minutes. The traces of the battle between the two enormous beings were still there, and there was a wide area shrouded in black fog in front of him. This area took up a large area. Han Shuo stopped in the air and gazed down. He discovered that the black fog covered an area of 10 miles. The moonlight was completely obscured by the black fog and couldn't shine in at all. Han Shuo couldn't see anything with his eyes either. Waves of fierce and thick evil aura filled the area shrouded in black fog. It seemed to contain some sort of terrifying danger. Han Shuo couldn't sense the existence of any living beings within, as if he was completely blocked by the thick black fog. Hovering in the air for a while, Han Shuo released a Yin demon and had it descend towards the area below. The shapeless Yin demon slowly descended and dove into the area shrouded in black fog with a whoosh. Suddenly, Han Shuo's connection with the Yin demon was completely severed. The Een demon that entered the black fog disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Han Shuo couldn't sense the Een demon's location in the slightest. By now, Han Shuo was truly shocked. His connection with Gilbert was due to the power of the contract, so it was understandable that it was blocked by that area. However, the three Een demons had been refined by Han Shuo through his blood essence and had disappeared without a trace after entering that area. This was truly a bit frightening. The area 10 miles in radius below was completely covered by thick black fog. He couldn't see anything at all. Han Shuo could only feel that it was filled with an evil aura. He was certain that there was no simple existence within. The dark forest is full of wonders indeed. There's actually such a strange place. It looks like I have to go in and see what's going on if I want to understand what's going on. Han Shuo looked at the area below and murmured to himself. He activated the magical yuan in his body and formed a protective shield around his body, slowly descending towards the area below. When Han Shuo gradually approached the black fog, all sorts of negative emotions, such as fear, grief, rage, and madness, suddenly surged into Han Shuo's mind. It was as if a force was trying to invade Han Shuo and make him lose himself in an instant. However, Han Shuo, in the bloodlust realm, had absorbed all sorts of negative emotions from the dead during his last 2 massacres. He was already used to the invasion of this kind of fear and madness. He wasn't affected in the slightest, and his expression remained calm and composed. This is really interesting. Han Shuo couldn't help but murmur in surprise when he felt the negative emotions surge into his mind. His body suddenly sank and he landed directly in this area. In an instant, the training he'd lost with Gilbert and the Een demon was instantly re-established. It looked like the black fog only blocked the communication between the outside and the inside, and couldn't stop the people within from communicating with each other. He didn't hurry to move through his connection with Gilbert. Instead, Han Shuo looked around with bright eyes, planning to first imprint the situation in this area into his mind so that he could make the right decision when danger arose. Due to the presence of the thick black fog, Han Shuo's vision was affected. He could only see things 10 meters away from him. In the dark forest that was densely covered with plants, this area shrouded in black mist seemed so unusual and unique. There wasn't a single plant within a 10-meter radius, only barren rocks of all sorts of dark colors. There was an oily green stream flowing beneath Han Shuo's feet. The stream flowed soundlessly without any fish. Looking up at the sky, the thick black fog covered everything. There wasn't a bit of light to be seen. The entire space was dark and gloomy, filled with the smell of desolation and death. "Oh!" Han Shuo exclaimed. Through the Een demon's observation, he saw a strange stone tablet. There were even some words carved on the upright stone tablet. This made Han Shuo decide to immediately go over and take a look. Chapter 241. When Han Shuo arrived at the stone tablet, he could only see a single line of words engraved on the stone tablet from afar: Ermite Cotton. It was actually the name Ermite Cotton. This simple line of words had already shocked Han Shuo. As a citizen of the Lancelot Empire, he had heard of this deified figure like thunder. Every citizen of the Lancelot Empire could recount his deeds in detail. As the greatest existence in the dark element in the history of the Lancelot Empire, Ermite Cotton was a legendary dark magus with the strength of a demigod. 500 years ago, it was Ermite Cotton who assisted the first king of the Lancelot Empire in establishing the Lancelot Empire. It was precisely with the help of such a figure that the founding king of the Lancelot Empire conquered all foreign races, drove away the barbaric orcs, and expelled the greedy and despicable goblins. He stood out among the major powers and established political power on this land, allowing the Lancelot Empire to steadily stand tall on this land for the past 500 years. It was said that Ermite Cotton was a legendary dark magus with the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. Such a powerful figure in that era not only created the existence of the Lancelot Empire, but also forever became a legend. He was revered by all the citizens of the Lancelot Empire for 500 years. Until now, his fame and greatness had not been surpassed by any of his descendants. Ermite Cotton's entire life was accompanied by great legends. He had defeated countless experts, opened up new frontiers for the Lancelot Empire, and destroyed the fighting spirit and confidence of all foreign races that resisted. Wherever the iron hooves of the Lancelot Empire passed, all races would crawl on the ground and pledge allegiance to the Lancelot Empire. However, such a terrifying demigod-like existence had mysteriously disappeared without a trace at the peak of his life. At that time, the Lancelot Empire was at its peak and had conquered all the surrounding countries. It was the time when Ermite Cotton should have been enjoying all the glory. However, he had mysteriously disappeared. The first king of the Lancelot Empire was unable to accept the departure of his most sincere friend. He had mobilized all the forces in the world to search for him, but to no avail. There were many different versions of legends about his mysterious departure. Some said that he was tired of fighting and went into seclusion. Some said that he transcended everything and went from being a demigod to becoming a god. Some said that although he defeated countless strong people in his life, he also suffered dozens of injuries. In the end, the weak body of a sorcerer could no longer bear the pain in his old age, and so he tragically died of illness. However, legends were just legends after all. In the absence of concrete evidence, all theories were illusory. The mysterious disappearance of Ermite Cotton had been an unsolvable mystery for over 500 years. However, there was a stone tablet with Ermite Cotton's name carved on it in this strange place shrouded in black fog. From the shape of the stone tablet and the meaning of the words carved on it, Han Shuo was certain that it was a type of tombstone used to commemorate the dead. This filled Han Shuo's heart with shock. He couldn't help but want to approach the tombstone and carefully examine it. It was at this moment that Gilbert took the initiative to approach Han Shuo through his connection with Han Shuo. Han Shuo could even feel Gilbert's anxiety. Han Shuo intended to take a closer look at the tombstone, but had no choice but to give up on that thought as Gilbert rapidly approached. He raised his guard and prepared to act. With a flip, Han Shuo landed behind a large boulder. At the same time, he released a demon in Gilbert's direction. A tremendous rumble rapidly approached from afar. In dragon form, Gilbert actually didn't fly. Instead, he slithered his body like a huge python as he slithered towards Han Shuo. The Cyclops' enormous body was hot on Gilbert's tail. The golden dragon that had been fighting with the Cyclops was also slithering on the ground like Gilbert. He also didn't use the dragon race's innate ability to fly. "Great Master, hurry and save your pitiful servant." As he rapidly approached, Gilbert's draconic eyes shone with a frantic light as he continuously shouted in a deep, heavy voice. Han Shuo, who had fallen behind the boulder, couldn't help but curse when he heard Gilbert yelling for him to save him before he even got close. "Stupid dragon, everyone will know that there's someone in front of us if you're making so much noise. How can I ambush you?" Seeing that he couldn't hide and ambush Gilbert, Han Shuo cursed lowly and leapt into the air, flying towards Gilbert. A domineering howl rang out, informing Gilbert of his presence. Through the demon's surveillance, Han Shuo discovered that both the Cyclops and the Golden Dragon seemed to be chasing after Gilbert. He didn't know what wicked thing Gilbert had done to make the two enemies join forces to kill Gilbert first. Gilbert, who had been terrified along the way, calmed down slightly when he heard Han Shuo's piercing howl. He then crawled over with even more effort. He yelled before he even reached Han Shuo, "2 against 1, how shameless and wicked. Damned stinky bug, you almost ambushed us to death when we were tired from the battle. That's fine, but you actually brought us to this forbidden land and left us with no way out. You're the most shameless and wicked." Contrary to Han Shuo's expectations, the Cyclops actually let out a thunderous curse amidst the crazed roar. A shameless person who sneaks into someone else's territory has no right to criticize others. Gilbert seemed to gain a bit more confidence when he arrived in front of Han Shuo. He turned back to mock the Cyclops with disdain and quickly moved his huge body to stand in line with Han Shuo. "You're pissing me off. You damned bug, I'm going to kill you." The Cyclops was infuriated and roared at the sky. His single eye shone with a terrifying light as he pounced at Gilbert. Most of the Cyclops' body had been burned by the Lord of the Flames, and his 2 huge green palms were a mess of blood and flesh. It looked like the battle with the Lord of the Flames and the battle with the Golden Dragon had indeed left him with quite a few injuries. Shut up. You can hit him and curse him, but you're not allowed to mention the words bug or stinky bug in front of me, or I'll kill you first, you damned one-eyed thief. The Golden Dragon roared angrily behind the Cyclops. The Golden Dragon's body wasn't in good shape either. Not only were large patches of his golden scales black, but some of them were also stained with blood. Even his huge head had a bloody scar. It looked like he'd suffered serious injuries from the consecutive battles. You're a mad dragon. Do you think I'm afraid of you? The Cyclops and the Golden Dragon had fought their way out of the valley and had long since become enraged. Although he was extremely angry at Gilbert's despicable actions, he didn't have a good impression of the Golden Dragon either. He immediately turned around to face the Golden Dragon, seeming to want to fight at any moment. This was indeed the case. The proud Golden Dragon couldn't take any provocation. He had already roared and charged forward after the Cyclops' roar and immediately began to fight with the Cyclops. He'd forgotten his target this time and didn't care about Gilbert's life or death. What's going on? Han Shuo felt a headache coming on as he watched the two enormous beings fight in front of him. He couldn't help but turn his head to look at Gilbert and ask with a wry smile. Hee, I saw the two of them fighting and followed them from behind. I took advantage of the fact that they were both exhausted and moved a boulder the size of a small mountain over, wanting to take the opportunity to smash them both to death. Who would have thought that they'd be so clever and actually dodge the boulder? Then they chased after me. I was so flustered that I didn't know where I was going. I ran into this strange area. The two of them had lost their minds and followed me without thinking. Then I discovered that my power had been sealed. Not only did I not have the magic to spray poison and flames, but I also couldn't fly. Of course, that stupid Golden Dragon couldn't fly either and could only crawl like me. It seemed that even the Cyclops' power had been sealed. After a short moment of panic, they made me their primary target and started to attack me together. I had no choice but to come and find you. Gilbert didn't care at all and cackled wickedly as he explained Han Shuo's despicable actions. Looking at his proud expression, it was obvious that he wasn't ashamed of it, but rather proud of it. You really are shameless. Han Shuo commented after listening to Gilbert's explanation. I learned this from you. Gilbert cackled and pushed all the blame onto Han Shuo, as if he'd been so pure and kind when he'd left the underground world. Rumble. A huge collision sound came from where the Cyclops and Golden Dragon were fighting. All sorts of dark-colored rocks in the surroundings exploded as the Cyclops and Golden Dragon fell to the side in exhaustion. There was a huge crater between them. Just as the two enormous beings struggled to stand up and were about to continue fighting to the death, the Cyclops' thunderous voice sounded, "Wait, why isn't this human affected by the environment? He can even fly in the air." The Golden Dragon and Gilbert also focused their puzzled gazes on Han Shuo as soon as these words left his mouth. They seemed to be filled with astonishment and confusion, as if Han Shuo, who was currently hovering in the air, was a peculiar existence. Human, there are no magical elements in this forbidden area. What right do you have to stand in the air? The Golden Dragon coiled up with difficulty and raised his head high. Even now, he hadn't forgotten the pride of his tribe and seemed to want to overwhelm Han Shuo with his aura. He looked down at Han Shuo from above and questioned him like he was interrogating a criminal. None of your business. Han Shuo responded very bluntly, taking an extremely dismissive attitude towards the Golden Dragon. As the Golden Dragon roared angrily, the Cyclops couldn't help but mock thunderously, "Stupid dragon! Do you think someone who can stand in the air in this forbidden area would be afraid of you? Haven't you heard of the legends of this forbidden area? Do you really want to die?" The Golden Dragon strangely shut up as soon as the Cyclops' words left his mouth. His two head-sized eyes quickly flashed with a strange light as they focused on Han Shuo. The dragon's head shook in disbelief and growled lowly, "Impossible, how is this possible? Great demigod existence, you must have surpassed the limits of humans. Please sprinkle your benevolent radiance and take us away from this forbidden area." The Cyclops looked at Han Shuo with sincere entreaty in his single eye. His enormous body even bowed in a strange manner, expressing his respect towards Han Shuo. Even the golden dragon fell silent as he muttered to himself. He stared at Han Shuo without saying a word. As proud as he was, he couldn't immediately lower his head in front of Han Shuo, but his eyes expressed the same urgent pleading. "What do you mean?" Han Shuo was speechless as he looked at the two enormous beings. He rubbed his head in silence for a while and couldn't help but ask in confusion. All the super-rank beings of the Dark Forest know the legend of this forbidden area. An earth-shattering battle occurred here 500 years ago. It's said that even true gods participated in it. That battle caused all the beings of the Dark Forest to tremble. The enormous commotion lasted for 3 days and 2 nights, and no one knew what had happened inside. The Cyclops' face was filled with lingering fear as he continued with a thunderous voice. None of the powerful beings that tried to go in and see what was going on were able to walk out of the forbidden area. None of the beings that mistakenly entered the forbidden area in the next 500 years were able to walk out. It's said that magic and fighting aura are all restricted in the forbidden area. All beings only possess pure physical strength and are unable to take a single step out of the forbidden area. Only demigods that have surpassed the sacred rank can walk out of the forbidden area without these restrictions. Great human demigod existence, please take us away from here. Although the golden dragon didn't say a word, his gaze towards Han Shuo was completely different now. His eyes were filled with entreaty, and the golden dragon had no choice but to lower his proud head. "I think you've made an error in judgment." Han Shuo looked helplessly at the two enormous beings and spread out his hands in explanation. "I'm very sorry, I'm not a demigod existence." Chapter 242. How is this possible? If you weren't a demigod, how could you not be restricted by the forbidden land and remain in the air? The Cyclops couldn't believe this reality, or perhaps he was afraid that his hopes in Han Shuo would be dashed. He had a look of disbelief on his face. Han Shuo chanted the most basic necromancy magic. The summoning of skeletons that had worked every time had no effect this time. There were no abnormalities in the dark and desolate space. This necromancy magic had failed. So it was like this. Han Shuo's heart jumped and he understood that the Cyclops wasn't lying. It looked like he really couldn't use any magic in this forbidden land. "Wait!" Han Shuo called out softly to the Cyclops and the golden dragon. His body abruptly rose into the air and broke through the shrouded black mist. However, just as Han Shuo felt that he should be able to leave the black mist, a vast, boundless, and strange power blocked the sky like a mountain weighing millions and millions of kilograms. Han Shuo fiercely broke through the air and crashed into it, causing great pain all over his body. However, he couldn't break through the shroud of black mist and leave this strange space. There was no need to try anymore. Han Shuo already understood that the entire area within 10 kilometers of the black mist was bound by this strange power. Just like the cemetery of death, he couldn't take a single step out of this place without opening the boundary. He landed dejectedly and helplessly, rubbing his buzzing head. Looking at the astonished Cyclops and golden dragon in front of him, Han Shuo spread his hands and apologized. As expected, the entire forbidden area is blocked by a boundary, and the same goes for the sky covered by the black mist. I think that we won't be able to leave the forbidden land without a special method. By now, the Cyclops and golden dragon had started to believe that Han Shuo wasn't a demigod like they'd guessed. With their hopes dashed, the two powerful beings didn't even have any interest in why Han Shuo could fly in the air when faced with the threat of death. They started to sigh in despair. Han Shuo could understand their dejection and despair when he saw that the two powerful beings had not only lost interest in his ability to fly, but had also stopped attacking Gilbert. "Great Master, what should I do? I don't want to stay in this damned place forever. Let's continue my unfinished legend in the world of sensual pleasures." Gilbert was extremely anxious as he yelled in annoyance. Not a single being had been able to leave the Forbidden Land in the past 500 years, and there was no lack of super-rank magical creatures with long lifespans. However, when Han Shuo walked into this area, he only felt a desolate silence. There wasn't the slightest hint of life in this place. This meant that the super-rank magical creatures with long lifespans must have died long ago. Looking at the sky, Han Shuo discovered that the black mist that had permeated the entire area had gradually become thicker, perhaps because of his forceful charge. The dark, damp air was filled with an extremely dangerous and cruel aura. I think it's unlikely that we'll die of old age here even if we want to. Han Shuo murmured to himself as he sensed the changes in his surroundings, then suddenly cried out, "Careful, there's danger." Gilbert, who had been blaming the heavens and others, as well as the despairing Cyclops and Golden Dragon, sensed the terrifying changes in their surroundings when they heard Han Shuo's cry of alarm. Their survival instincts immediately kicked in, and they also tensed up, paying attention to their surroundings and preparing to deal with any danger that might appear. Dark mist swirled in the sky, and balls of thick, inky black smoke that couldn't be dispelled could be seen from time to time. An evil and terrifying power swept towards them with the force of an avalanche, making it difficult for them to even breathe. The power that enveloped the boundary weighed down on everyone's backs like a million-ton mountain. Even colossal beings like the Cyclops and Golden Dragon howled in the face of this terrifying pressure. This was a sign that they couldn't bear the pressure and had lost control of their minds. Gilbert, who was only rank 1, had already prostrated himself on the ground like a limp snake, unable to even stand up. Magical yuan circulated madly as a dark, shiny shield enveloped Han Shuo's entire body. Bolts of black lightning circled within the shield as the pure magical yuan tempered the shield over and over again, making the shield's defensive power more and more resilient. In the end, the barrier that protected Han Shuo's body was as beautiful and enchanting as the purest piece of black jade, while Han Shuo was like a living fossil wrapped in black jade, full of demonic charm. The Forbidden Land had imprisoned all of the mysterious powers in this world, but the magical yuan from another dimension wasn't something that could be extinguished by the Forbidden Land. Therefore, when Han Shuo frantically circulated his magical yuan to form a protective shield that he'd tempered over and over again, he actually withstood the enormous pressure and stood proudly, unafraid. A pair of deep eyes widened as he observed the changes in the entire area. Not a single bit of the sinister aura in the sky escaped Han Shuo's senses. His originally frantic heart began to beat rapidly, and Han Shuo's steady breathing was no longer calm as he actually started to pant. The strange power that enveloped the entire Forbidden Land actually made Han Shuo feel a trace of familiarity. This kind of power was even more enticing to Han Shuo, who was in the bloodlust realm. A wondrous sensing force suddenly came from the demon infant in Han Shuo's body. The demon infant was like a small, bloodthirsty beast that suddenly smelled fresh blood. It could no longer endure the violent rampage in Han Shuo's body and urged Han Shuo anxiously, as if it wanted to do something. Pale green light flashed within the inky black fog that enveloped the entire area. Balls of light gathered towards Han Shuo's group of 3 from all directions. An enormous and terrifying aura of evil overflowed from the large balls of fog. As the pale green light continued to flash, the balls of fog gradually separated and changed shape, forming a sinister and terrifying face that pressed down. "No!" The Cyclops roared angrily and swung his enormous iron shovel at the sinister and terrifying face in the sky. The Golden Dragon also roared and swept his enormous dragon tail towards the sky, crazily sweeping towards the sinister face of a demon. However, the Cyclops and Golden Dragon's attacks landed in the air and had no effect on the malevolent phantoms. They fearlessly regrouped after dispersing and pressed downwards with frightening ferocity. "Fiend, it's a fiend!" Han Shuo suddenly cried out from within the protective barrier. Han Shuo, who was in the bloodlust realm, suddenly removed the protective barrier that covered his entire body. Rays of bloody light shot out from Han Shuo's body as a thick, murderous aura suddenly wrapped around Han Shuo's body. At the same time, a ray of red light shot out from the top of Han Shuo's head. The demon's lair edge's purple and red light flourished as it floated above Han Shuo's head, continuously spinning and dancing. The normally calm Han Shuo's expression suddenly became sinister and frightening. His white teeth formed the shape of a demon's and his eyes were blood red. The murderous aura emanated from his body and entangled with the demon's lair edge above his head. Blinding bloody light shot out from both of them at the same time. The sinister ghost faces that covered the entire area made shrieking expressions, but didn't make any sound. The evil faces that had been pressing down on the Cyclops and Golden Dragon revealed panicked expressions, seeming to want to escape at all costs. However, with Han Shua's demon's lair edge as the center, an enormous whirlpool had formed in the sky above Han Shua and the demon's lair edge. The whirlpool was more than 10 meters wide, and a murderous aura swirled within it. Blood-red light flashed as waves of evil energy filled it. All of the fiends that had gathered over seemed to be attracted by the enormous whirlpool. All of them wanted to flee in panic, but none of them were able to leave. Under the pull of the enormous whirlpool above Han Shua's head, the fiends seemed to be tied down by invisible ropes no matter how far they escaped, slowly moving towards the whirlpool above Han Shua's head. The terrifying pressure that could topple mountains and overturn the seas disappeared in an instant. Gilbert, who had been lying on the ground like a soft little snake, straightened his back after the pressure disappeared. He looked at Han Shua, who was causing a huge commotion in the air, and murmured to himself, "Great Master, what the F***ck are you doing? Little dark dragon, just what kind of creature is your master? Just what is he doing? Why doesn't he have the presence of fighting aura or magic that a human should have?" The proud golden dragon couldn't help but roar when he saw the great commotion that Han Shua had caused and heard Gilbert's murmurs. No matter what, we would have already been killed by those evil ghost faces if his strange actions had resolved the danger we were in just now. The Cyclops stared deeply at Han Shua with one eye, but didn't discover that Han Shua had revealed even the slightest bit of fighting aura or magic. According to his understanding of this world, he understood that Han Shua might not be a demigod. However, Han Shua's current actions were illogical and had removed the enormous pressure that had enveloped the entire area. This made the Cyclops not dare to underestimate Han Shua at all. Now that his master had displayed his might, Gilbert also became arrogant. He raised his neck high and shouted loudly, "Damn it, how would I know what's going on? I just know that my master is very powerful. Otherwise, as a great dark dragon, why would I crawl at his feet?" The two enormous beings actually believed the dark dragon's words. Han Shua's current actions and the existence of Dark Dragon Gilbert were enough to prove that Han Shua was a powerful existence. It was because of this that the Golden Dragon and Cyclops accepted the Dark Dragon's rude shouts. It was as if they had forgotten the Dark Dragon's despicable actions from before and didn't dare attack him again. With such a powerful master, and this powerful human currently using his own unique method to remove the enormous pressure that enveloped the entire area, they didn't want to attack Gilbert at this time and attract unnecessary trouble for themselves. If this human stopped his current actions and that powerful threat appeared again, the Cyclops and Golden Dragon would still be dead. Therefore, the two enormous beings only snorted coldly at Gilbert's rude shouts and didn't say anything else. Seeing that Gilbert didn't know anything, the two didn't waste time asking him any more questions. They silently recovered their strength as they paid attention to Han Shua's changes. The malevolent demonic face that had previously floated in the air had now become a pitiful escapee that couldn't escape at all. Even the Shah that had left the area in the beginning were slowly pulled into the whirlpool one by one, no matter how terrified and panicky they were under the enormous suction force of the whirlpool above his head. It was as if the bloody light whirlpool created by the demon's lair edge and the fiendish aura around Han Shua's body had a restraining effect on these strange fiendish spirits. In the end, not a single one of them was lucky enough to escape. Under the strong suction force of the enormous whirlpool, the pale green faces shrieked in silent terror as they turned into streaks of dark green light and merged into the whirlpool. The enormous whirlpool was like a strange tree. The enormous whirlpool above was like a lush foliage, while the thin passageways below were like the roots of the enormous tree. As the fiends were sucked in one by one, the enormous whirlpool was filled with a terrifying and chaotic energy. Blood red, black, and pale green, three kinds of strange lightning, carrying a thick evil aura, slowly converged into the demon's lair edge and Han Shua's body through the rhizome-like passageways. The whirlpool spun faster and faster, and the demon's lair edge, which had absorbed a large amount of evil aura, shone brightly. The ferocious might of a peerless weapon was gradually revealed. Violent howls continuously sounded from the demon's lair edge, causing the Cyclops and the other two enormous beings to tremble in fear. On the other hand, the killing aura around Han Shua had condensed into a mist. The thick killing aura faintly formed the shape of a giant overlooking the earth behind Han Shua. The giant was more than 10 meters tall in the air and possessed an extremely terrifying ferocity. It looked exactly the same as Han Shua, who was a small dot on the ground with blood-red pupils. This spectacle continued for a day and a night. The enormous whirlpool above Han Shua's head disappeared, and all the fiends in the area also disappeared. Even the giant that had appeared behind Han Shua slowly flew back into Han Shua's body. Only the demon's lair edge continued to shine brightly as it floated above Han Shua's head. Roar! An evil and terrifying howl suddenly rang out from Han Shua's mouth. Han Shua suddenly stood up with blood-red pupils, as if a peerless soul had awakened from the depths of the earth. He glared viciously at the Cyclops, Golden Dragon, and Dark Dragon Gilbert, causing them to tremble from the depths of their hearts. Chapter 243. What does he want to do? The proud Golden Dragon couldn't help but cry out in alarm when he saw the extremely evil Han Shua glaring at him with bloodshot eyes. How would I know? Oh my, great master, just what do you want to do? I am your most humble servant, Gilbert. The little black dragon had just straightened his back when he saw the ferocious Han Shua walk towards him step by step. A thick wave of fiendish aura swept towards him like a wave of blood, and he immediately screamed in panic. Unfortunately, at this moment, Han Shua's expression was ferocious and terrifying. Both of his pupils had turned blood red. He let out another howl towards the heavens. Like a bloodthirsty beast, he was already charging towards this side. The fiendish aura around Han Shua had thickened into the shape of a red mist, and as Han Shua leapt forward, a ferocious aura that could topple mountains and overturn seas surged forward. Not good, he's lost his mind. The Cyclops' thunderous voice suddenly cried out in alarm, already preparing for the worst. At this moment, the Golden Dragon was standing closest to Han Shua. The proud Golden Dragon had become Han Shua's first target. Amidst the roiling flames, Han Shua had already descended upon the Golden Dragon's head and smashed his fist towards the Golden Dragon's enormous head. If it had only been Han Shua's fist, perhaps the Golden Dragon wouldn't have cared too much. After all, Han Shua's size was not on the same level as the Golden Dragon's, and the strength and area of effect of his fist were very limited. It would be very difficult for him to cause too much damage to a colossus like the Golden Dragon. However, when this fist came crashing down, the fiendish aura around Han Shua naturally condensed into the shape of a crimson fist the size of a small mountain. This fist completely enveloped the Golden Dragon's body, and the enormous pressure made it hard for him to breathe. It carried with it a destructive wave as it came crashing down. The proud Golden Dragon let out a pained groan and muttered a few dirty words. He hadn't recovered much of his strength yet, but he had no choice but to stretch out his coiled body. His wriggling tail, like the Great Wall of China, suddenly slammed into the incoming fist. Rumble! An earth-shattering sound came from the collision between the giant fist and the Golden Dragon's tail. The rocks around the Golden Dragon exploded one after another. The Golden Dragon let out a painful roar. Its straight and winding tail seemed to be unable to bear the weight as it trembled and bent together. Its huge body that was more than 10 meters tall was directly smashed to the ground by this punch. Wah, great master, your humble master is proud of you. You used your strength to directly beat the Golden Dragon, who has the strongest physical body of the Dragon Clan, to the ground. I, Gilbert of the Dark Dragon Clan, have witnessed this historical moment. You are indeed worthy of being my chosen master. The ferocious and terrifying punch smashed the Golden Dragon to the ground. The Cyclops' single eye was filled with the light of disbelief, while the Dark Dragon Gilbert was crazily shouting and yelling. My great, heroic, miraculous, noble master, what do you want to do? Don't tell me you're planning to make a move on your most adorable, most loyal, most honest, and most humble Gilbert? However, Dark Dragon Gilbert's flattery was not over yet. The giant fist of bloody light had disappeared, but when Han Shua's foot was about to kick out, a large blood-red foot appeared in the air. Its target was the rambling Dark Dragon Gilbert. Without waiting for Gilbert's panicked voice to finish, this foot was already directly stomping down on Dark Dragon Gilbert's large head. If things went wrong, Gilbert would never be able to make a sound again. Roar! Just as the Dark Dragon roared in despair, a towering figure suddenly rushed out. A large green arm forcibly helped Dark Dragon Gilbert block this foot. After a series of rumbling vibrations, the green Cyclops sat on the ground and fearfully looked at the sinister face of Han Shua, who was slowly descending with a fierce roar. Damned stupid dragon, he has already lost his mind and is no longer your master. Do you want to King die? The golden dragon, who had finally stood up from his crouching position, couldn't help but shake his head and shake his tail as he roared loudly. He wanted Dark Dragon Gilbert to recognize the truth. Dark Dragon Gilbert seemed to have come to his senses. In the depths of his heart, he was unwilling to believe that Han Shua would kill him. He continued to muddle-headedly mumble to himself, "How is this possible? How could my master attack me? Stupid dragon, although I don't know what happened, I'm afraid that your master has truly lost his mind. He's very, very powerful now. That unlucky golden dragon and I don't have much strength left. Only the three of us together may be able to deal with your master." The Cyclops watched as Han Shua slowly descended from the sky. A vast and boundless murderous aura had firmly locked onto the three of them. He couldn't help but anxiously yell at Dark Dragon Gilbert. Shaking his large head blankly, Gilbert felt bitter inside. Although he felt despair and grief at Han Shua's ruthless and merciless killing, he still stubbornly said, "No, absolutely not. I can't fight my master with you, even if I die." "Idiot, the three of us together can't kill him. We only need to resist or restrain him. We're doing this to save him, you stupid and damned Dark Dragon. Do you understand the meaning of this?" On the other side, the golden dragon roared wildly in exasperation in the face of the threat of death. "That's right, stupid dragon, we're saving him, saving him. Idiot." The Cyclops immediately understood after hearing the golden dragon's words and roared in agreement. The dragon race was a proud race. If it weren't for special opportunities, it would be very difficult for them to be tamed by the humans that they looked down upon. However, once a dragon established a contract with a human, their loyalty was unquestionable as long as their master was alive. Gilbert had spent some time with Han Shua. Han Shua's actions were very much in line with the Dark Dragon race's evil appetite. Even when Han Shua had lost his mind and attacked him viciously, he had never thought of resisting. This was just like the Dark Dragon race's lustful nature. It was an innate imprint of the giant dragon race that no one could change. The golden dragon was well aware of this race's characteristics and immediately changed the meaning of resisting. He turned resisting Han Shua into saving Han Shua, so as to resolve the knot in Gilbert's nature. Indeed, as if he had been enlightened, the roars of the golden dragon and Cyclops woke up the muddle-headed Gilbert. After thinking it through, Gilbert frantically yelled, "That's right, I want to help you. Nothing can happen to you, your humble servant still needs your guidance." Roar! Han Shua, who was slowly descending towards the three colossuses, suddenly let out a ferocious howl. An unimaginably terrifying sound wave rushed straight towards them. Circles of murderous blood waves, like ripples on water, rolled in layers in the dusky void. The evil, murderous aura contained in the sound wave poured down from the sky in the form of burning clouds. Blood seeped out of the mouths, noses, and eyes of the three enormous beings under the impact of the terrifying sound wave. Their enormous bodies rolled about rapidly, unable to withstand the impact of the terrifying sound wave that was mixed with a murderous aura. "Damn it, what kind of attack method is your master using? Instead of letting him yell and scream, why don't we face his giant fists and feet?" At least we can withstand the physical damage, but we can't do anything about this kind of sound wave attack. Blood as thick as a baby's arm seeped out of the golden dragon's lantern-sized eyes. Blood also flowed out of his ghastly mouth as he complained in agony. Heavens, what the hell is going on? My master shouldn't be this strong. Gilbert had interacted with Han Shuo for a long time. Although he wasn't very clear about Han Shuo's true strength, from Han Shuo's performance, it was absolutely impossible for him to possess such terrifying strength. There's no other way. Let's combine our strength and attack him together. Otherwise, not only will we die without a doubt, he won't be able to escape the backlash of his strength and explode. The terrifying strength that shrouds his body right now comes from those fiends from the Forbidden Land. He must have wanted to absorb all of them, which is why this situation has occurred. The Cyclops was the calmest of the three enormous beings. Seeing that they were about to die from the impact of the sound wave if this continued, he immediately suggested anxiously. Then, without waiting for Gilbert to respond, the Cyclops and the Golden Dragon, who were supposed to be enemies, glanced at each other and actually stood up from their rolling positions in unison. Enduring the terrifying pain in their bodies, they charged straight at Han Shuo, who was standing proudly in the air and surrounded by layers of murderous aura. Han Shuo, who was roaring madly, sensed the unusual movements of the two enormous beings. He laughed sinisterly as he floated towards the two enormous beings. His blood-red pupils suddenly lit up with a brilliant crimson light. The crimson light overflowed from his pupils and condensed on the bodies of the two enormous beings as though it had materialized. The two enormous beings had just straightened their bodies when they were swept by his glistening bloody eyes. Their bodies were immediately invaded by a terrifying strength, and they actually began to tremble madly as if they had epilepsy. They let out mournful cries from their mouths. "Damned black dragon, you're right behind him. Subdue him immediately, or else we'll all die." When Han Shuo's blood-red pupils swept across the golden dragon's body, the tough dragon scales covering its body shattered with popping sounds. Fresh blood gushed out like a fountain. The golden dragon shook its head and wagged its tail as it dodged while howling miserably. "Hurry up, you're saving him, damned stupid dragon." The Cyclops' green skin suddenly tore apart when the seemingly solid bloody light in Han Shuo's eyes landed on it. Then, the wound magically grew infinitely larger. Because his heart was filled with an unknown fear, he also let out a series of miserable cries. For the first time, he let out a howl of profanity. Amidst the frenzied roars of the two enormous beings, Gilbert yelled, "I'm going to save you, save you." Resolute emotions appeared in Gilbert's enormous eyes. Then, Gilbert abruptly extended his enormous dragon claw, carefully swatting it towards the completely unaware Han Shuo who was standing proudly in front of him. He planned to first knock Han Shuo unconscious, then think of a way to restore Han Shuo's lost rationality and rescue Han Shuo from his current chaotic state. There was no need to doubt Gilbert's loyalty. Bam! A huge muffled sound rang out as a ball of red mist formed from murderous intent appeared above Han Shuo's head, tenaciously resisting Gilbert's claw. Han Shuo wasn't injured at all within the red mist, but he seemed to have sensed Gilbert's malice. He couldn't help but turn around and glare at Gilbert with his bloody eyes, roaring angrily. All of the chaotic murderous aura surrounding Han Shuo was affected by Han Shuo's rage and immediately gathered from all directions, surging wildly into the demon's lair edge that had been floating in front of Han Shuo's chest. The enormous murderous aura was like waves of blood as it rapidly converged within the demon's lair edge. The demon's lair edge, which continued to hiss violently, suddenly exploded with a terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and earth. When all of the murderous aura surrounding Han Shuo had been absorbed by the demon's lair edge, the demon's lair edge had become a peerless weapon that could split the heavens and earth. 100-meter-long blood-red light shot out from the demon's lair edge. Han Shuo, holding the sword hilt, was like a demon god that could destroy everything. Han Shuo adjusted the direction of the 100-meter-long light with his right arm, slowly aiming it at Gilbert. During this process, wherever the terrifying 100-meter-long aura passed, the air cracked, and the hard dark rocks that had existed for an unknown number of years were directly turned into stone chips flying everywhere under the violent aura. Faced with the boundless aura, Gilbert's enormous body appeared so small and helpless. His dragon eyes were filled with despair, fear, grief, and all sorts of emotions. He stared blankly at the ferocious Han Shuo and couldn't help but mutter, "No, you won't. You're my master, you can't really want to kill me. Stupid dragon, run. Hurry up and run." The Cyclops and the Golden Dragon frantically reminded him at the same time. For some reason, the hearts of the two enormous beings were also filled with grief at this moment. However, the normally carefree Gilbert who liked to hoot crazily was stupefied, as if he had become an idiot. His lantern-sized eyes gradually overflowed with blood-colored tears, but his body remained unmoving, as if it had taken root. An earth-shattering roar rang out from the mouth of the ferocious red-eyed Han Shuo. The 100-meter-long demon's lair edge that possessed the power to annihilate the heavens and earth was finally slowly raised and aimed at Gilbert. The Cyclops and the Golden Dragon didn't doubt that as long as this edge descended, Gilbert would absolutely be torn into pieces of fresh meat. He would have no hope of surviving, and all traces of life would be completely erased. A crazed howl rang out from the mouth of the crimson-eyed Han Shuo. It was only now that Han Shuo finally spat out a clear human voice. His face was filled with an expression of pain and struggle. As he roared with unwillingness, his entire body was enveloped by black lightning. The blood vessels on his neck and arms ruptured with popping sounds, spraying blood all over his body. However, Han Shuo didn't seem to notice the frightening injuries on his body at all. He seemed to be unable to control his limbs, his expression twisted in pain as he stared at his right hand with his bloodshot eyes. He continuously roared, "No, no." Suddenly, Han Shuo's expression hardened. His bloody left hand abruptly smashed towards his right arm that held the demon's lair edge. The blow fell like lightning, accompanied by a crisp creaking sound. Arrows of blood shot out from both of his arms at the same time, spraying out in all directions. Such a self-harming attack obviously produced a miraculous effect, saving Gilbert's precious life. His right hand clenched tightly onto the 100-meter-long blade, and a change immediately took place. The 100-meter-long edge that had been attacking Gilbert suddenly changed direction, narrowly bypassing Gilbert's enormous body. It carried a ruthless, evil, and fierce sword aura that could destroy everything as it shot towards the boundless forbidden area shrouded in black fog. Suddenly, the entire sky above the forbidden area within a 10-kilometer radius was filled with blood-red light. The earth shook violently as a terrifying explosion filled the entire forbidden area. It was as if the heavens and earth had been destroyed by the terrifying explosion. The black fog that had enveloped the forbidden area for 500 years slowly dissipated as the blood-red light tore through it. Rays of warm and bright sunlight penetrated through the obstacles that had shrouded the place for 100 years, sprinkling all over the dark and desolate forbidden land, landing on the two colossi covered in cuts and bruises, on Han Shuo who was gasping for breath in a pool of blood but whose eyes had regained clarity, and on the dark dragon Gilbert whose eyes were brimming with tears as he revealed an expression of ecstasy. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.